Good morning, branches. Welcome to our Sunday service, but more importantly, welcome to my home. Thank you for inviting us into yours to share your Sunday with you. Just wanted to go and start off by saying, gosh, I miss all of you. It's so nice to look out and see some familiar faces and those new faces when we meet, but I know you're out there and I can feel it, both the familiar faces and the new ones. We're here to commune and explore what it's like to be a Christian. And Daniel's going to challenge us and say, don't be such a Christian in the next series coming up. So with that said, settle in, get comfortable, get a cup of coffee, and let's have a great Sunday getting some God.
Good morning, branches. Thanks for tuning in. We're going to worship our God this morning. I just want to encourage you to sing loud, sing proud. We got the words on the screen for you. Come on, let's worship. Come on, sing People Come Together. People come together, strangers, neighbors, our blood is one. Children of generations, of every nation, of kingdom come. Don't let your heart be troubled. Hold your head up high, don't fear no evil. Fix your eyes on this one truth: God is madly in love with you. Take courage, hold on, be strong. Remember where our help comes from. Oh, 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 His name, Jesus, Jesus, our redemption and our salvation is in His blood. Jesus, the light of heaven, the friend forever, His kingdom come. Come on, don't let your heart be trouble. Oh, hold your head up high, don't fear no evil. Oh, fix your eyes on this one truth: God is madly in love with you. Take courage, hold on, be strong. Remember where our help comes from. Oh, out, declare, swing wide, all you heavens, Let the praise go up as the walls come down. All creation, everything with breath, repeat the sound. All his children, clean hands, pure hearts, good grace, good God. His name is Jesus. Yes, it is. Swing wide, all you heavens. Let the praise go up as the walls come down. All creation, everything with breath, repeat the sound. All his children, clean hands, pure hearts, good grace, good God. His name is Jesus. Come on, swing wide, swing wide, all you heavens. Let the praise go up as the walls come down. All creation, everything with breath, repeat the sound. All his children, clean hands, pure hearts, good grace, good God. His name is Jesus. Thousand times I've failed, still your mercy remains. Should I stumble again, still I'm caught in your grace. Everlasting, your light will shine when all else fades. Never ending, your glory goes beyond all fate. Your will above all else, my purpose remains. The art of losing myself in bringing you praise. Everlasting, your light will shine when all else fades. Never ending, your glory goes beyond all fate. In my heart and my soul, I give you control. Consume me from the inside out, Lord. Let justice and praise become my embrace, to love you from the inside out. Will above all else my purpose remain, the art of losing myself in bringing you praise everlasting. Your light will shine when all else fades, never ending. Your glory goes beyond all fame. In my heart and my soul, I give you control. Consume me from the inside out, Lord. Let justice and praise become my embrace, to love you from the inside out. Everlasting, your light will shine when all else fades, never ending. Your glory goes beyond all fame, and the cry of my heart is to bring you praise from the inside out. Lord, my soul cries out, Lord. In my heart and my soul, I give you control. Consume me from the inside out, Lord. Let justice and praise become my praise, to love you from the inside out. Everlasting, your light will shine when all else fades, never ending. Your glory goes beyond all fame, and the cry of my heart is to bring you praise from the inside out. Lord, my soul cries out. Everlasting, your light will shine when all else fades, never ending. Your glory goes beyond all fame, and the cry of my heart is to bring you praise from the inside out. Lord, my soul cries out from the inside out. Lord, my soul cries out, Lord. God, that's just our heart's cry this morning. God, that you would consume us from the inside out. God, that we would be changed to be more like you. God, I just pray that you would come to this place. God, come into our hearts. Lord, and just come and do a work in us. God, that we would reflect you. God, that we would be more like you. God, come and change us from the inside out. In Jesus' name, amen.
What's up, Branches? Many of us watching today probably call ourselves a Christian, but what does that label really mean? For some, it ties us to a church, a grandparent, or maybe our spouse. For others, the label Christian represents someone who's a bigot, a hypocrite, or a fake. Why is there so much disconnect? The truth is, someone can claim to be a Christian without ever living like Jesus. So we have to ask ourselves, is it enough just to call ourselves Christian, or should we focus on living like disciples? Welcome to Stop Being Such a Christian. In our world today, there's many labels and many brands that we are all familiar with. In fact, if I were to say some of those labels right now, we would almost immediately be on the same page. For instance, millennial. If I say that, you know what I'm talking about. You might even have some faces that pop in your head or some names that you might assume I'm talking about. If I were to say Democrat or Republican, same thing kind of happens. We know where the conversation's going, we know the topic, and we even know some names associated with them. If I were to start naming off brands, if I said Nike, you might say, just do it. If I say Apple, you would know I'm not talking about a fruit, I'm talking about a computer. But when I say Christian, is it that clear? Are we on the same page at the time that I say Christian? I'm not convinced. Just consider this. When you say, I'm a Christian, what are you really referencing? What are you associating with? For many of us, when we say I'm a Christian, we're making a statement about the fact that we were baptized, or maybe how we were baptized, or which church we were baptized into. When you say I'm a Christian, you may be referencing which church you go to on a Sunday or on a Saturday, whether it's Lutheran or a Catholic church or maybe a Baptist church. For some of you, when you hear the word Christian, that's just something you used to be. You'd say, I used to be a Christian, to which many others of you watching today would say, wait, that's confusing. Once a Christian, always a Christian, right? For some of us, Christianity is tied to a belief system. For some of you, Christianity is tied to our behavior. And still, for others, Christian is the very thing that you despise the most. You would say, I can't stand those Christians. They're fundamentalists, they're bigots, they're hypocrites who push their agenda on everyone around them and fail to live up to the standards they hold everyone else to. And so what we want to do over the course of this series is look at, man, where did this word even come from? Where did it originate? And is it even the proper or accurate label or brand that we want to be known for? And here's the crazy thing as we start to consider this. The prevalence of the word or label Christian in our society today does not match the prevalence of Christian when we look at the Bible. In fact, when we look at the Bible, we find that Christian is mentioned 3 times. And this morning, I want to look at one of those times. It's the very first time that this word kind of pops up into the world and into culture. And it's found in the book of Acts. Let me set that book up for you for just a second. Acts is a record of all the events that immediately follow Jesus' life, death, and resurrection. It follows the work of Peter. It follows the work of Paul as they build what we would call today the Christian church for the very first time. Those who follow Jesus or following them, and they're building this group. And so in Acts chapter 11 and verse 25, we pick it up here and it says this. It says, then Barnabas went to Tarsus to look for Saul. It says that when he found him, he brought him to the city of Antioch. And so for a whole year, Barnabas and Saul met with the church and taught great numbers of people. The disciples were called Christians first at Antioch. The first time that the people who are following Jesus, that the church, that they're referred to as Christians, is in the city of Antioch. And if we look at other historical documents recorded by other people, we see that the people who called the church, the people who were in the church Christians, weren't the people in the church. It was the population at large. It was the Romans, the Greeks, the Jews, and they were referring to them as Christians, little Christs, based on their affiliation with Jesus Christ, based on their affiliation with the teachings of Jesus. And this term, this label, this brand, was not created by the church. It was created by the rest of society, by the rest of the world, as an insult, as a mockery to who they were and what they lived by. And so when we look at, man, what did the church call themselves? What term did they use to reference themselves? Well, it's right here in this verse. They didn't call themselves Christians. They called themselves disciples. It says the disciples were called Christians first at Antioch. Now, what does disciple mean? What does disciple mean? Disciple means learner. Disciple means pupil, apprentice, adherent, follower. A disciple is someone who's learning something. They're a pupil or a student, an apprentice of somebody. They're adhering to a certain set of teachings or a certain person. They're following somebody. They're not just, this is the word that they use to describe themselves. And it occurs over and over. Let's just look at a few occurrences in the book of Acts. Let's look at Acts chapter 6 in verse 7. It says, so the word of God spread. The number of disciples, not Christians, the number of disciples in Jerusalem increased rapidly. The number of people who were following increased rapidly, and a large number of priests became obedient to the faith. A large number of Jewish priests became obedient to the faith, and then they were labeled and called a disciple, a follower, an apprentice. Let's look in Acts chapter 9, verse 26, another occurrence of this. When he came, he being Paul, when he came to Jerusalem, he tried to join the disciples. You remember who Paul was? He's the guy who was trying to tear down these Christians. He probably used that term to offend them and to make fun of them. He tried to join the disciples because he met Jesus, was transformed and changed. But they were all, it says, afraid of him. Not believing that he really was a disciple, not believing that he was different, not believing that he had changed. But they didn't call each other Christians, they called each other disciples. We look 10 verses later and we see a woman even referred to as a disciple, which is maybe not as common in the Bible. In Joppa, there was a disciple named Tabitha. In Greek, her name was Dorcas. That's kind of unfortunate. She was always doing good and helping the poor. They never called themselves Christians. And there's many other occurrences where they're calling themselves disciples. They're saying we're followers of Jesus. We're doing something different. We're following a person. And so they're looking at, they're labeling themselves as disciples. And here's what's interesting is now today, many of us would say, I'm a Christian. But never once in Scripture does it say, and they became Christians. And if you notice, every time someone is labeled as a disciple, it's almost always tied to an action or a transformation. It's almost always tied to something changing, something being transformed, something being changed in who they are. And it's never saying, and then they became a Christian. So I would urge us, I would ask us to consider that the real question we have to ask ourselves is not, am I a Christian? Many times that's what we ask. Many times we even ask people that we know, are you a Christian? What do you believe? What religion are you? Are you a Christian? But I would consider the real question we have to ask ourselves is not, am I a Christian? It's am I a disciple? The question we must ask ourselves is not, have we put on this label of Christian that can kind of be redefined based on what's comfortable for us? The real question we must ask is, am I a disciple? See, Christian can be redefined over and over and over because the definition is never given to us in the Bible. The Bible never tells us how to be a Christian, but there is very clear definition around what it means to be a disciple. And so this question is actually terrifying. Am I a disciple? Because there's a clear definition of what it means to be a Jesus follower. What it means to be someone who's following Jesus, someone who's adhering to Jesus' teachings. There's very clear direction, very clear definition to being a disciple. In fact, Jesus begins to give us some of that definition right before he goes to the cross, right as Judas, his disciple at the time, leaves to betray him, to turn him over to the religious leaders, to be put on the cross to die. Judas leaves, and Jesus knows this is kind of his final hours. He's only going to have a couple more interactions with his followers, his disciples, before he goes away. And he begins to define what it means to be a Jesus follower, what it means to truly be a disciple. And one of his disciples, one of his followers, John, records this in John chapter 13, starting in verse 33. This is what Jesus says. He says, "My children, I will be with you only a little longer." He understands the end is coming. He says, "You will look for me. And just as I told the Jews, so I tell you now, where I am going, you cannot come." And when he says this statement, you can bet many of his disciples, remember, they've been doing life with him for the last 3 years. They've watched him teach. They've watched him do all kinds of miraculous signs and wonders, and they've been following him everywhere he went. He had no home. They never stayed in one place for very long. And so this statement would have been confusing probably especially for one of his disciples named Peter, who's just kind of a firecracker. And when Jesus says this, you'll notice here in a few verses, Peter holds on to this and says, where you're going, I cannot come. What do you mean? I've been with you this whole time. But right after this, Jesus drops one of the most important, significant lines of his ministry, I believe. In verse 34, John records Jesus saying this, a new command I give you. This word new means never done before. It's brand new. You've never heard this. He says, a new command I give you. He says, love one another. They'd never heard this command before. He said, love one another. Ascribe so much value to the person next to you that you would never dream of hurting them, of offending them, of causing them pain or causing them hurt. He's saying, love one another, and he's not talking about a feeling. This isn't a command. Jesus isn't commanding us to feel something. Jesus is commanding us to do something. It's not a fall in love type of thing. It's a love type of thing where it puts the other's needs before our own. He says, a new command I give you, love one another. He says, love one another as I have loved you, so you must love one another. And then he says this, by this love, by this thing, by this, everyone will know that you are not Christians, but that you are my disciples. By this love, everyone will know that you are my followers. If you love one another, they'll know that you are following me. And this next part throws us off completely, because it says that Simon Peter asked him, Lord, where are you going? Hey, I know you said all that stuff about loving one another. I know you said all that stuff about, hey, ascribe all this value to us, to each other. Don't harm one another. I know you said that there's that whole thing about a new command, but I just want to know, where are you going? Because I want to go with you. I just want to go with you. Where are you going? In this moment, Simon Peter completely misses the whole thing. Like so often we miss the whole thing. Jesus isn't asking us to feel something. Jesus isn't asking us to even go with him right now. He's saying you will be known not by the label that others put on you. You will not be known by the label that you put on yourself. You will not be known as Christians. The point in being a disciple of Jesus is to be known by how we love one another. By this love, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. That's how we will be known. And so, my challenge to us today, for those of us who are Jesus followers, is to not be so caught up in being known as being a Christian, but that we would be caught up in being loving towards those around us. And we ought to begin by valuing others above ourselves, by loving those around us the way that Christ has loved us, by asking the question, not am I being Christian enough? Not am I looking the right way? Not do I have the correct label? Not do I have the correct look to the world on the outside? If we could just push that away, and we could rebrand ourselves as the people who love one another well, we would be life-changing, world-changing, politically altering people for the better of all who live around us. We must begin by valuing those who call themselves disciples as well. In fact, I'm challenging us for just 1 week. What would it look like? Regardless of the polarization of the church right now, the polarization of the world, we've all got opinions. Inside the church, we're seeing differing opinions about how to handle all of the things that are going on in our world. But what if we were to look at one another and say, you know what? Before I'm a politician, I'm a Jesus follower. Before I have all of these opinions, I know that we can be united around the person and the truth and the teaching and the love of Jesus. We must begin by ascribing so much value to each other that we could not dream of hurting one another. And for those of you who view Christians as judgmental, hypocritical people who revel in the failure of those who seemingly look nothing like them, I'm so sorry. If we had stuck to being disciples rather than being caught up in being labeled as Christians, you may not feel that way. And so I would urge you, while you may have made the decision to reject Christianity, please do not reject Jesus. Because he still could be the Son of God who came and died on a cross to solve the very problem all of us are trying to solve. And that problem is the brokenness of humanity that we call sin. I hope you'll join us for the second week of Stop Being Such a Christian. Love you guys. We're going live.
Welcome to Talking Branches. Daniel,
Good
what a
morning.
great series. I'm excited for this series.
I'm excited and nervous all at the same time.
Yeah, Stop Being Such a Christian. That's going to ruffle some feathers, I would imagine.
Yep, probably.
Yeah. And we're stepping into kind of a new environment too with the way we're doing our live service. We've got a few people here. You can't see them. Hopefully you won't be able to hear them either. That's up to you guys though. And we got a hello to the kids upstairs.
Yep.
We got a kids area up there for the people that are attending the watch party here, which is kind of exclusive. I mean,
Yeah, it's invite only for now.
invite only
We're
for now.
testing this out.
Yeah, we're testing it out. We're going to figure it out. And to all the watch parties. We got watch parties going on all over the city and surrounding region.
Which is pretty awesome.
Scappoose and St. Helens.
Yeah, people watching in their homes and, and
that's
doing
really
church.
cool. There's actually one at my house
cool.
right now.
There is.
Yeah.
I dropped off some coffee and creamer and donuts there.
Nice. How'd it look?
Well, you know, it's your house. You know what it looks like better than me.
I mean, like just the situation.
It was good. People were pulling in. As
I
was dropping
I
stuff
checked
off.
the ring cam a couple minutes ago to
You
see
did.
that there was a parking lot full,
That's
or
good.
I guess
Was it full?
driveway. It's pretty full.
That's good.
It's a little dangerous there too, so
It is.
I'm always
It's
a
a
little worried
sketchy
about
corner.
the parking situation at my house. But hey, enough about my parking situation.
Yeah,
We're
yeah.
gonna get into today's
You fix
content.
that on your own.
Like I said, I'm excited for this series because I mean, Stop Being Such a Christian. Man, that's like I said, gonna ruffle some feathers. But I think
Yeah.
it's good to be challenged. I think anytime that we think we're right, we should always examine ourselves to see if we're really living right and you know the things we're doing are actually like on par with what God's trying to do in our lives. So I think it's always good to be critical of ourselves.
Well, let me talk a little bit real quick too about the whole concept of the series is like there's so many people in our world who put on the label of Christian, but don't realize what that actually means, you know, and so to almost redefine what does it mean to follow Jesus using the definition of disciple is really what we're after, because there really is no definition of Christian that's really clear.
And I see that a lot too, just being, you know, dealing with youth, working with youth. They use the label a lot unintentionally. I mean, it's just them growing up, but they say like, oh, she's Christian or he's Christian, like not a Christian, they're just Christian. And I'm like, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
You know, and it's almost always something bad too. It's like they're Christian, but you know, they're doing this or they're saying this or they're dating this person. You know, it's fun
So
times.
just redefining what it means to really follow Jesus and be a disciple, which is more important than just saying, having an answer to the question, where do you go to church or what religion are you?
Right, and I think this series in general is just going to be good for people, skeptics and believers alike, just to kind of define, clarify what it's supposed to look like, because like you said, we get a bad rap from the world when we ascribe that label and then don't really know what it means. And like you said, it's almost always with something negative, like that Christian did that, and they shouldn't. So I want to get into that a little bit here.
Yeah.
So this is a big question, but if we can kind of, you know, bring it down a little bit.
Sure.
What does it look like to be a disciple on a daily basis? Like start to finish of the day, like what should that look like?
Well, I think when we look at what Jesus' new command was, he said, love one another as I have loved you. It really looks a lot less about what can I do for myself and a lot more like, it looks a lot more like how can I leverage my position, like Jesus did, to benefit those around me? How can I leverage the time that I have?
Right.
How can I leverage the money that I have? How can I leverage the understanding, the knowledge, the experiences that I've had in my life to love those who are doing life around me, whether it's our neighbors, whether it's our kids, our spouse, you know, the people we work with. it looks a lot more like thinking of less of yourself and more of the needs of others.
Yeah.
Seeing a need and asking ourselves, how can I be a part of fulfilling that need, whether it's spiritual, whether it's physical, whether it's financial need. How can I be a part of filling that need? Because there's needs all around us. And oftentimes we just don't have the eyes to see, or we don't recognize, oh my goodness, that's an opportunity for me to be the church, for me to be a disciple, for me to love others the way that Christ has loved me, providing something for me, right? The gospel is God giving us something we didn't deserve. That's grace. God not giving us what we do deserve, which is mercy. So how can we extend those things through our life is a lot more powerful than knowing all the answers to the questions around religion or faith or what to believe. And we'll be known for that.
Yeah.
People will recognize, oh my goodness, if you need something, there's this group of people, they call themselves Christians, but we're known for what we do and how we serve our community. I think that's what it looks like. And a lot of that comes from this ongoing conversation that we're having about what does it look like to really allow the gospel to take root in our lives? What does it really mean for us to live in light of Jesus, in light of the cross?
All right, that's good. I really like where you're going with that. So there you guys go, like the essence of the whole entire thing. If you just go out and love each other, and be perfect and great, then
be perfect. Yeah.
Then it's game over. We will have accomplished everything. So thank you so much for tuning in. That's it. No, but so that is. I mean, that's like the end goal. That's what we should be doing. But that's hard. I mean,
it is.
You say to. Man, if you talk about sacrificial love and loving like Jesus loved to our own families, the people that we already claim to love at least and should love, that's hard.
That's hard.
That's a hard thing to do, like to always be willing to give of yourself to the people around you, even the people you don't like. That's hard to do.
It's very hard.
Maybe let's talk about a little bit, how do we get to that point where that's even in our mind all the time, to where we wake up and we're like, we know this is what we're supposed to be doing. And just to direct where I'm going with this, I'm sure you know, but your daily disciplines as a disciple, like how do we get to, I mean, I feel like spending time with God is really how we get to understand the heart of God and what he wants us to do and be in tune with that. Because that, I think, is a vital piece in actually carrying out what you just talked about.
Going back to the source, which is God, which is his heart. And I think we're constantly going to battle for the rest of our lives our own selfish nature. We're always going to be turned back in on ourselves. It's kind of a survival instinct. It's just kind of part of that. It's part of what's even modeled around us. So we have to continue, to go back to Jesus and our relationship with him, to continue building that relationship through prayer, through reading the scripture, through reading the Bible and understanding God's heart. The more we look at the story of God from start to finish, from the beginning of Genesis to the end of Revelation, and we begin to see the faithfulness of God through all of our brokenness as humans, as we understand his heart, it will be easier for us and it will become more natural for us to reciprocate that in our world. And then number two, I think being around other people who have that same goal, who have that same, who are working towards that same end that we just talked about, loving selflessly, serving others. That's where community comes in, because if we're not held accountable to that, or being reminded, or being shown that it's possible because we're seeing other people that we do life with do those things and walk those things out, then we'll be stuck in isolation. I was just talking to somebody literally just 30 minutes ago who stopped by in the parking lot as I was walking out. We're talking about how right now isolation can breed a lot of bad, negative things. And isolation is a really real thing during this whole pandemic and this whole thing going on. And it's critical for us to be around other people who have that same goal and can remind us when we're down, when we're feeling like, man, I'm not doing this right, or I don't know how to fulfill these needs. And they're up. They can encourage us, and vice versa. My wife and I find this often. One day when she's not feeling motivated, I am, and we're able to just feed off of each other and those. And so if you don't have that community, that's striving for the same thing, you're missing out too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so important. I think now more than ever, like you said, you have to be
Yeah.
intentional about the community part because, I mean, it may look like Zoom or, online.
It may not even be your favorite way of doing
Right.
it, but you've got to do it. Yeah.
It's
And I
so
think for a
essential.
long time that, the Sunday morning experience has been a lot of that 1 hour that we've gathered together here in the building has been kind of a community served on a platter. Like, hey, just show up and community will happen. And we're having to realize, no, we need to be intentional with our relationships. We need to schedule time in and of ourselves to be in relationship with other people who are working on following Jesus and adhering and being pupils and being disciples. We have to do that on our own calendar as well. And
Yeah.
that's super important.
That's good. So, not that everybody watching wants to be a pastor, I can't imagine that. But for a pastor like yourself, what is like a Monday, maybe actually I'll go Thursday just because I know your schedule a little bit, or let's go Friday. We're gonna go Friday. What does a Friday look like as far as wake up in the morning, you read, you pray, how does that look? Model that for us.
Well, for me, the first thing I do is go downstairs and open up. Well, it depends. I either make a cup of coffee, depending on how tired I am first, or I do crack open my Bible. And I know that sounds so...
I'm glad you said Bible.
Yeah, why?
Well,
What else?
there's other things you can crack open.
That's true. It's not a...
You don't
yeah,
usually say
that's
crack open your Bible, so I was like, where's it
crack
going?
open
It's all right.
a can of... No, it's Bible. Yeah, I open my Bible, and I really do. I found in middle school, I remember realizing when I read first in the morning, it set the tone for the rest of my day.
Yeah.
And the days I didn't read first, it just wasn't as good. It just contextualizes your day and refocuses every interaction you have based on the first few things you do in the morning. I wouldn't prescribe that that's what you must do. Some people should drink coffee. Some people should eat. Some people should work out before they ever open their Bible because they won't remember what they read.
Right.
But I think starting off with that at some point before you get into the chaos of your day, it really acts as a filter for the rest of your day.
Yeah.
And in there is God, what are you trying to teach me through what I'm reading? And I'm okay reading 5 verses versus reading nothing. I'm okay if I don't have much more time than 5 verses and a quick flare prayer. There's other mornings where I'll read a chapter and then I'll read 2 and then I'll read 3 and I'm taking notes and it's really impactful. Other days it feels more routine and less spiritual. Not every morning is this spiritual awakening for me. But starting off with that I think is so crucial.
And there's actually some science behind that. I can't think of the right word of what exactly it is. It's not endorphins, but maybe it is. But when you wake up in the morning, a lot of people grab their phones and they start, TikToking or Instagramming or whatever. And gosh, what is that? I don't know what it's called, but it releases something in your brain. My wife would know. You might know. But it's the feel-good something,
it's the
right?
feel-good stuff.
Feel-good stuff in your brain.
Yep.
And what happens is once you do that first thing in the morning, you kind of get that high, and then you end up chasing it the rest of the day, not being able to hit that high again, or you're looking for it. And if we start out that way, it kind of throws us in a negative slide the rest of the day as far as our just feelings. And so it's so important to not just start reading in the morning, but to not go to your social media, go to your feel good something, because then you're just left chasing that the rest of the day.
Right.
And I heard a pastor talk about that and how important it is to replace that with Bible reading or something that will actually allow you to pursue something better throughout the day rather than just that feel good that you get from social media.
Reading the Bible does feel good sometimes, though.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a positive thing.
It
But I
is.
get what you're saying. Yeah. Starting off with the right priority is a big deal.
Right.
So
it's good.
Yeah.
So some people might be watching right now and be like, hey, listen, it's probably easy for you to love people in your life because they're great. People in my life, maybe not so great. How do you love people that are not lovable?
I think it really comes back to everything we've been saying. When you get the heart of God in you, when you're absorbing and seeing and reading about how God's love, how large God's love is for people in general, and you begin to recognize that the person on the other side of the table, or the person behind the argument, or the person behind the keyboard, the person behind the profile picture is loved by God, created by God. They're somebody's kid, they're God's kid. When you begin to ascribe value to people who are maybe disrespectful, spiteful, and mean, but you realize they're a human being who has had real experiences, has experienced real pain and real hurt, and also is just loved by the creator of the universe, you begin to realize that the petty arguments don't matter as much as that person behind the argument. They begin to not matter as much as the hurt that you've experienced because of their sin or because of their brokenness. And I think it's so important. It's really easy for us to recognize the brokenness in somebody else.
Oh, yeah.
It's immediate. Oh, they're broken. Oh, they're full of sin. Oh, they're spiteful. They're mean. They're angry. And it's really easy for us to make excuses or to explain reasons for our personal brokenness. And we forget that as much as we deserve, or as much as we desire mercy and grace, they do too. And sometimes the best way for someone to recognize that they are loved by God is for us to do exactly what Jesus called us to do, to love others as he loved us, which he looked past our brokenness, past our sin, past our pain, and saw that we are valuable because we're created by God. And he gave his life knowing that some would reject him anyway.
Yeah.
And so if that's our goal, and if that's what we see, and that's the heart that we are striving to I guess, grasp from God, we start to see the people who are even hurtful and spiteful to us as children of God as well, as someone who is loved by God, and it changes the way we interact with them because we recognize they are broken and so are we. We know a Savior who's redeemed us, and they may not. And that's more important than us feeling good or than them being respectful to us. So I think that's the only way. That's the only way is to ascribe as much value to them as Jesus did, as Jesus does to them. So he died on the cross for them just like he died on the cross for us.
Right.
So I think that only comes from engaging and interacting with Jesus on a regular basis.
Right. And that really is just so like opposite of our natural instinct, our natural desire. I mean, we see someone that's wronging someone, and to see them how God sees them in their sin, in their pain, and
we want justice for sin.
Yeah,
we want judgment against
mostly for other people.
For other people,
right,
and we want
not
mercy and grace for ours. And Paul talks about that in Romans. I think it's the end of chapter 12. I've just been reading 12, 13, and 14 in Romans over and over through this whole thing. And Paul talks about that. He says, let justice be handled by God because God is just. He says, live at peace whenever it depends on you. Live at peace with everybody. Everybody, live at peace with them. And let justice be taken care of and judgment be taken care of by God because he's just.
Yeah.
So trusting that, I think trusting in God helps us understand and interact with people with that love and that care. So
yeah, that's awesome.
That's good stuff.
Yeah, I like it. I'm excited for the series, so stoked. We actually have something a little bit new today for everybody doing a watch party, or even if you're watching this alone, wherever you're at. We got some discussion questions for you guys to just kind of discuss in your group. They're going to be up here for a little bit, so you can pause it. I think it's going to take over our screen, so it'll be there front and center, so you can pause that and just talk about it in your group, because I think the series really, as far as shaping the Christians that we were really meant to be, not just the ones that culture says we are or that we've been raised with, but really living life like Jesus lived. I think this is vital.
Yep, that's going to be huge. So take advantage of the discussion questions that are going to be on your screen here in just a moment and discuss them amongst yourself. Otherwise, we will see you guys next Sunday at 10:30 for part 2 of Stop Being Such a Christian.
All right.
Love you guys.